All right, hi everybody. As you're building and kind of finishing building up your structure, it's always a nice idea before you start adding texture to kind of smooth everything out and kind of prep it. So we have little, we call them Petri dishes, little dishes. You can grab a little sponge over by the blue tools. And if you really gently come along some of your carvings and just kind of clean it up a little bit of water is fine. That will kind of smooth and prep the surface. Too much water though will make your tile really weak, and then it would be more likely to break. So if you are going to come in and smooth your designs out before you add texture, that's fine. We also have a couple paintbrushes over in the tool area if you want to use some little paintbrushes to get into areas that maybe are a little bit more tricky with a sponge. You can do that as well. And again, a little bit of water is fine, but you're not soaking it down. You're just kind of trying to smooth and get rid of any of those little shavings that are still left over from your carving. I'm gonna smooth out some of my lines and my surfaces so that when I come in and add texture, I get a nice contrast between the textures that I'm adding and the smooth surfaces that I've carved and built up. So I think this is an important step. A lot of this has to do with your craftsmanship. How will you make something? You know, take the time to do a really neat job, make it look as very best as you can, and you'll be more happy with your final product. So take some time. Even in here, if I use a little wood tool, I can kind of clean up some of that slip or some of my scoring marks around the edges. There to be two different stones, so I could carve a little bit away. And then if I come in, even with a paintbrush maybe, try and smooth it out a little bit. So once you're done carving, again, you should be working on your tiles at kind of a similar pace, so they're developing at the same time. You're gonna come in and you're gonna add some textures before we start putting these together as the box. And so there's a couple different tools that you can use to add textures. If I want to add, these are some clouds. I might build up some more clouds, but I could put a few textures in the clouds, even just by kind of carving, using maybe a carving tip. As my piece becomes more leather hard, it's easier to carve. So if I would have added this cloud just today, I probably would not be carving these textures yet. Let your clay stiffen a little bit, like that one I just added, so they're pretty soft. It doesn't work quite as well when your piece is not leather hard. So I'll wait for that one to get more leather hard. But those two are leather hard. Same with this part. I just added this part on my barn, so it's still pretty soft. So I'm not gonna carve into that. But if I use maybe this wood tool, this piece I did add on the last demo, so it's more leather hard. So maybe I wanna carve a little window in here. I probably will. So I'll carve some of that out, and then I'm gonna add some lines. And notice I'm using a nice wood tool. They kind of provide, they give a little bit thicker lines. Don't use the needle tools, they're not thick enough. You want to think of your designs as hills and valleys so the glaze can run and pool across the textures. Now I just did that. If I kind of follow my design, well, of course I smushed some of it in there, but I'll come back through. Maybe I use this other end. I want just a nice, neat, straight, clean looking texture on my barn. And again, I'm gonna carve that window out. So I'm just gonna kind of hop over that. So you want your lines thick enough. You can also use a pencil. Sometimes that's kind of a nice tool to give some nice deep lines, give some textures in there. When it stiffens a little bit, maybe when it gets more leather hard, I'll come back and clean it up a little bit. Maybe I want to give some textures on the road, so I could do something with a pencil. I could score and just kind of scratch. Maybe I want to put a little texture on that pathway, right? And that texture will kind of contrast with the smooth pebbles and rocks. Texture makes things more interesting. Right? What else could I do? I could do something down here. I might build up a little something. Maybe in my fields. Maybe I just want to put some dots in them. Just for something different. And just using the tip of the pencil works just fine too. So just a couple textures here and there will really help make your design look more interesting. If you don't like that, I don't like that. I'm just gonna smooth it out and I'll try something else. You can always take a different piece of clay and try some textures out on a different piece of clay before you add it to your piece. That's fine. You can use the back of tools to press in things. Maybe I want to do lines. Oh, I like that better. Right? If it's supposed to be fields and have some crops in it, maybe I like that better. Maybe these are the crops. And notice I don't just do one texture, I repeat the texture. That's kind of that repeating pattern we had talked about in your designs. You know, what are some repeating shapes or lines that you can create to help reinforce that theme in your piece? I like that. Maybe I'll do a couple more up in there. It just makes it a little more interesting to look at, and then when we glaze it, the colors will run and pool, and it really does give a nice look to it. So there's a little bit of information on adding texture.